Welcome back to the Hair of the Dog podcast. Heather's back this week, and this week we are talking about how her and I are going to spend $100,000. Now, these are just hypothetical $100,000, but it's still a great exercise nonetheless, one that we promised we'd come back and share after our episode number 123, Money Trigger SOS. You know the one with a $35,000 Hermès purse. What I thought was Hermes. Anyway, stay tuned. Let's spend $100,000, and I want to know how you are going to spend it too.
Welcome to the Hair of the Dog podcast. If you're a pet photographer ready to make more money and start living a life by your design, you've come to the right place. And now, your host, pet photographer, travel addict, chocolate martini connoisseur, Nicole Begley.
Hey everybody, Nicole here from Hair of the Dog, and I am with my special guest, Heather Lahtinen, because we promised you a follow-up, and we are here. Hey, Heather.
Hey, how are you?
I am excellent, and I've given some time to think about how I'm going to spend $100,000. Now, I've got to say, before we get into this, the episode that we're referring to is episode number 123. It was Money Trigger SOS, where I talked you off the ledge from said $35,000 used Hermès purse.
Yeah. That was not a ledge. That was a cliff. I'm still kind of shook up about that. So much so that I told somebody about it this morning. So it's still clearly an issue, although it did help to talk it through. I just can't, it comes down to this, Nicole. We don't like things we don't understand.
Right.
And I don't understand that. And I just can't wrap my brain around it. So.
And it's too big of a leap, I think, too.
Yeah.
Like you start to push yourself outside your comfort zone, like to raise your money tolerance of like what's acceptable to have in your account, what's acceptable to earn from a photography session, things like that. Like it starts off, you're like, oh my gosh, there's no way I can earn $500 in a session. And then it's like, there's no way I'll earn $5,000, but then you get to like $750 and then maybe $1,500 and then $2,000 and then $3,000 and then $4,000. And you're like, oh, whatever. I can't believe I ever worked for $500. Like my minimum's $2,000 now. So you're just on your ladder up to your $35,000 purse. You're just currently, at least I am currently at $35 at Target.
Yes.
That's maybe TJ Maxx.
And I bought a Michael Kors purse, at Marshall's maybe 3 years ago for like $59. And I was like, whoa, this is too much money. I don't know what it was. It was around that price.
Right.
Definitely less than $100. I'm still carrying that purse. And it's filthy. And I just don't care. There are, we alluded to this previously, that there are some things that you're willing to spend money on and some things you're not, and for you it's vacations and the like, but purses are just not it for me. And so I don't know that I'll ever get to the $35,000 mark, but I do need to reconcile how I can, I don't know, maybe accept it and not feel like I want to hurl myself off a cliff.
Yes. Well, and in that episode we talked about, like, you and I both had a hard time coming up with ideas of what we would spend frivolously on ourselves, because the things that we like to spend our money on really benefit the whole family. So it's a lot easier for us to be like, oh yeah, no, I value travel and I'm making these wonderful memories for my kids and we're all together and it's great and it's not just benefiting me. And same thing with you with like goals of paying off the house and the things that you want to spend money on. It's benefiting everyone. It's like security of the family. But we needed an assignment to spend $100,000 frivolously on ourselves. Doesn't benefit anybody else.
This seems
anybody
like
else.
An impossible task. And it's been several weeks.
And at the same time, it's like twist my arm, like I just spent 100,000 hypothetical dollars on myself.
Right. I mean, I've been thinking about it for several weeks and I'm still struggling. So I can't wait to hear yours. What did you come up with?
Okay. All right. Well, it started off with like decorating my house and like hiring a decorator, because I feel like that's not extravagance, not the right word, but it's just not something I'm ready to invest money in for me personally at this time. Which the funny thing that happened because of that, and then I have another one actually. So decorating my house is where I started. And then I started like actually looking up some Pinterest boards and things. And I'm basically going to get started like doing a whole little bedroom remodel, mostly because I don't know, it's like a hodgepodge of stuff. And we have furniture. It's like heavy wood furniture, like darker wood furniture. And I don't dislike it. Like it's a pretty sleigh bed, but it's just, if I were picking out bedroom furniture now, it's not what I would choose. And I was looking at it, I'm like, well, I can update this without having to buy new furniture. So I always felt before, it's like, oh, I'm going to buy it. Like, whatever. I have furniture. It's fine. No one even sees it. Like my bedroom. I spend like every night for a good 8+ hours in there. I fold laundry what seems like every afternoon as well, because my family seems to wear a lot of clothes. But anyway, so I started looking on Pinterest. We're going to do like a board and batten on the back wall with just like tall vertical wood stripes and paint it like a really dark blue, and then repaint the rest of the house, maybe put some draperies up. And I'm going to kick off. I have like this fake tree in the corner that just collects dust. So that's gone. I'm going to put a nice chair there so I can sit and read comfy when I want to hide from my children.
Right.
So yeah, that's what I'm going to do for that. So I'm like, oh, well, then this is actually pretty easy and actually doesn't cost much money at all, because we know a woodworking guy that can do that, and just a little coat of paint and a chair and some draperies, done. So then I started thinking, okay, what would it really be? And what it would really be at this point in time would be a truck and a trailer. But wait, Nicole, I thought you were buying a truck. So Heather, I did the math.
Okay.
I did the math and I just can't do it. Because I started thinking, I'm like, all right, if I have a trailer, I've got personal property tax, because North Carolina is one of those states that gives you a nice personal property taxes on your vehicles, which is, lovely. I like to say that all the states are going to get their taxes one way or the other, whether it's high property taxes or, whatever, high income tax or high olive in California. But anyway, in North Carolina, we have personal property taxes on our vehicles. So I'd have to pay that. There'd be like 4 new tires to buy and maintain. There'd be yearly inspections, like all these extra expenses. And then, it started out of, well, if I get like my next car, I wanted like a Suburban or a Tahoe, like a SUV on a truck chassis. But now I'm looking at that versus like an Explorer. So still a full-size SUV, but not like not on a car chassis one, not the big truck one. Like $20,000 less than that big one. And I'm like, I like the big one. I don't like it $20,000 more. Like I don't need it. It would be nice, but I don't need it. So long story short, for how often we would go to shows, like 6 times a year is like a good year. I'm like, it's $6,000 basically to pay to trailer 2 horses to each show. So $6,000 a year. I worked out the difference from getting like the Explorer size car to like the F-250 plus the trailer. We're talking a good $45,000.
Wow.
Not including the yearly extra upkeep and expenses. And I'm like, that would take 9 years to go through and pay off. So anyway, long story short, right now I'm going normal car. My frivolous spend would be a truck and trailer. But who knows, maybe in a couple years, maybe I'll upgrade if we decide that we still want to do it. Because guess what? This decision isn't permanent.
Right. That's a very good point. That just because you make the decision. So what people suffer a lot from decision fatigue because they act like they are pouring concrete on their feet.
Right.
You're not. So ask yourself, is the decision reversible? And for most decisions, like almost 99% of decisions are in fact reversible. Because if you did invest in a car and it didn't work out, you could trade it in. You could get a truck. If you invested in a truck and you were like, whoa, this is too much, you could trade it in. There's always a way that you can reverse the decision. But okay, you were doing this math, this calculation on the $6,000 a year for somebody else to take the horses to the shows versus you spend. But that's not a fair calculation, because that's not the only reason. You want a truck because you like a truck. Now, maybe the trailer, that's like a direct comparison. But the truck, like you've always wanted that big truck.
Well, not necessarily pickup truck. I love like the Suburbans and the Tahoes, but they're almost as much as the pickup truck, and the pickup truck is safer or more powerful, better suited for pulling 2 big horses in a trailer.
Right. I was actually at YM Camera last week, and one of my photographer friends pulled up in her F-250, and it was a beaut. And I said, my friend Nicole would be so jealous right now. It's this big, beautiful. It was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I said, I watched her pull this thing into a parking space. I said, I got to tell you, that was an impressive parking job because that is a massive vehicle. And she said, yeah, I love this truck. It was very, very fancy. It was a nice truck. But the price tag reflects that.
Right. So, and how I knew that I needed to dig deeper, Heather, is I've had this resistance around this a while.
Yes.
That I've been like saying for 6 months, I'm going to order it. I'm going to do it. Actually, it's been like it's been like since the start of COVID-ish, since I got the horse. So almost 2 years that it's been like, I'm getting a truck. And I just couldn't take the next step. And I was like, is this a money thing? Because it's significantly more expensive than I've ever paid for cars in the past. Is this, or is there something else? Like, what's my resistance here? And then when I did the math and then I made this decision, it feels lighter and aligned. And I'm like, yes, we went out and looked at cars on Monday. So
okay.
So it's just like, I now know it's the right decision at this time, just based on my feelings, because again, our feelings are a barometer of, where we are.
Yeah, but you're wise to question those feelings because feelings can also lead us astray. They can tell us the truth, but they can lead us astray. And you're not, because I've known you a long time, you are not the type of person that makes decisions based on your feelings. You have a feeling, you explore it, but then you also look at logic. So you're not a rash decision maker. You thought this through and you looked at all sides and you just couldn't make it make sense.
Because I'm usually a really quick decision maker. It's like, oh, all right, done. I made that decision. And like every time we've shopped for a house, we've looked for one weekend and we're like, okay, that one.
Done.
Like I know what I like and I know what I want. And when I see it, I get it.
But the F-250 it's just
not the right time.
Not the right time. So that would be your frivolous spend. Although one could argue that that's not entirely frivolous because you would be using it for function.
Yeah, but I can still, I'm still doing the same function. It's not changing the function that I'm doing.
Yes.
Currently.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Okay,
so
great.
It's your turn.
So as of yesterday, we had this on the schedule for about a week. And as of yesterday, I still did not have anything. And I kept thinking I was talking to a mutual friend of ours and she's like, oh my gosh, that's so easy. I would get all the plastic surgery. She's like, anything I didn't like about myself, I would just go have it fixed. I thought that was funny. I have some fear around surgery, so that's not for me, but I just struggle. And then I was talking to you about, we do a lot of recording of podcasts, screencasts. We teach Lightroom and Photoshop. We teach online. And noise is an issue in my home. I'm always complaining about it. And so I had said, I want to build like a tiny home on our property where I could have my office and a soundproof room and I would be the only person with a key. So I would lock the doors and nobody could get in. Okay. But so I thought of that, but then it was like, no, that's for work. And that would be like, that would have a function and that would have a purpose.
But it's kind of like the truck. Like you have a place. We're recording right now. You make it work.
Right.
It's not that much of a hardship.
Correct.
It's just occasionally inconvenient.
Correct. So I could argue that, but I thought I wasn't sure if you would allow it. So I wanted to take it one step further and decided that this tiny home office situation needs to be in the trees. So I would call the Treehouse Master. If you've ever watched that show on TV, it's so interesting. And I would build this tiny home on our property, but up in the trees. But I would have it fully functional, like water, electric, heat,
and
everything.
And then would you Airbnb it?
100%.
Now this is an investment.
100%. I would. I could, you can't stop me from doing that. Okay. I would have it so that there was it was a full house, like tiny, right? But a full house, meaning people could stay. We could have guests in from out of town, but I would also have my office in it so that I could.
Well, this is going to be a problem. You're going to need your office somewhere else because if you build that and Airbnb it, that's going to be on all the best of the tri-state area romantic Airbnbs. It's going to be booked all the time.
Yeah.
So you should just do that as an investment.
Okay. But listen, if that happened, then, and the investment was doing well, then I would have the money to build another tiny house.
True.
Somewhere
true.
else
You're like,
on the...
I was planning on using this as an office, but I can never get in because it's always rented. So I'm going to need to build another one. And then you're going to have a tiny house compound with just like this whole little camping,
I've thought of it. Actually, when we built the homestead, part of my dream was just starting with the house. And then it was the chicken coop that we have a second detached garage in the chicken coop. And in my mind, it was going to be a chapel. I was going to build like a tiny chapel, so cute. Photographers could use it. We have areas on the property where photographers come and shoot. So I rent out the property. So I wanted to have a chapel. Then I was like, oh, I could have like an all glass studio. And then I was like, I need a cabin. And then I need a tree house. So I did have this, I have had this vision of like this community. Now, I have not run this by the permitting folks in our township at all. So I don't know what that looks like, but I do like to dream big. So if I had $100,000 to kickstart this, and if you won't allow me the tiny house or the tree house, then I would do a chapel, which is totally frivolous. Like, who needs a chapel on their property? But I just want big chapel windows, stained glass, like with a steeple. And I can actually picture it with like all of this decor outside. We could host events, but then again, photographers could use it.
There'd be cute little chicken decorations outside the chapel.
Yeah, 100%. The chicken chapel. I don't know, but it would definitely be cute. So I need those funds. So can we somehow shift this from hypothetical to I need investors?
Yeah, right. My GoFundMe page is. I love it. All right. That was it. We promised we would follow up with you guys with what we would spend our money on. And I would love to hear from you. Somebody actually sent me a DM this morning that she would spend her $100,000 frivolous money on more tattoos.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm thinking I'm actually going to post this on my personal Facebook page. I'm going to ask people what they would spend the money on. They can't say a car or a house or investments or paying off debt. And I bet you'll get a ton of responses. And it will be just interesting. So maybe people can find me on Facebook and comment there or just read through the comments because I bet it's about to get really interesting.
I think also when we release this, the day we release this, my team, please take a note because I'll totally forget. But anyway, we should post in the circle community.
Yes.
That I want your answers. I want your 100K answers. Boom. Actually, I'm going to go post in the circle community right now.
Great idea.
Because people have already listened to our one where we talk about this. Right. And then we'll link it up in the show notes if you guys want to jump on that thread and let us know what your 100K splurge is.
I would be so curious. Yes.
I know. I love this kind of stuff. So fun. All right. Thanks, Heather, for checking in with us. And we'll see you on another podcast soon. Bye, everybody. If you enjoyed this podcast episode, go ahead and take a screenshot of this episode on your phone and post it up there on your Instagram stories. And be sure to tag us at Hair of the Dog Academy. And we would just love to see how you're listening. And full disclosure, sometimes we just like to give away a little pet photographer swag in the form of Hair of the Dog t-shirts and sweatshirts. So what are you waiting for? Go ahead and share that screenshot of this episode. And don't forget to tag us at Hair of the Dog Academy. And while you're there, maybe you want to jump on over to our account and see what we're up to on the gram. Would love to connect with you. Thanks for listening to the Hair of the Dog podcast. This was episode number 130. If you want to check out the show notes for access to any of the resources that we mentioned, simply go to www.hairofthedogacademy.com/130.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Hair of the Dog podcast. If you enjoyed this show, please take a minute to leave a review. And while you're there, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our upcoming episodes. One last thing, if you are ready to dive into more resources, head over to our website at www.hairofthedogacademy.com. Thanks for being a part of this pet photography community.